Right, so a new scheduled banned and restricted announcement for Flesh and Blood. Now, in all honesty, I wasn't too sure if I was going to make a video on this, and I don't really think this will be a video strictly on it, right? We'll go through it, we'll do all the good stuff first, but in all honesty, I've had somewhat of a tumultuous time pondering over Fab and my interest in the game, at least for this, year of development, or probably into next year as well. And I'll explain that a bit more, but we'll cover this since we're on the page. So, for class constructed, Bonds of Ancestry, blue and yellow have been banned across all decks. So, Katsu and Zen are both hit by this. Now, basically, this giant article is fantastic. Again, the transparency from LSS is always wonderful to understand, right? They're acknowledging and accepting that they did not have the correct amount of time to truly test Zen, and as such, Bonds and its monstrosity of potential slip through the cracks. So this is trying to fix that without truly trying to gut Zen, right? So if you again are interested in this, I would read the whole thing, right? It's just fantastic, them outlining their mentality and thought process. But basically, right, Zen was the last hero they made. He had the least amount of testing time. Bonds fell through, and now here's the correction, right? And depending on how he performs, they might restrict it a bit more, but you can still get some aggression off, right? With Bonds of Ancestry Yellow, they've basically just hit the pitch side of things, and then also your ability to run 9 copies in class constructed, right? Down to 3, which is quite substantial, although you can obviously still search out with Zen, but your ability to chain them together has been severely reduced. So altogether, that is definitely a great sign, because the meta game for recent is truly Zen dominated, right? So it's 5-5, but there was another one that was substantially more as well. Yeah, here we go, right? Final result, Zen being 14-11. I mean, it's still 50-50-ish, so that's cool, right? Enigma has definitely dropped off, but yeah, Zen, definitely a powerhouse, and basically Nu was taken as a counter to Zen more so, I want to say, right? But yeah, so that makes complete sense. Perfect. And again, glad they're acknowledging that they were rushed. They didn't have the correct time. It's a little bit of curiosity to me, because again, I do think that, the amount of products we get for Flesh and Blood is not quite adequate for the type of game it is and the type of systems in play. But that's just my perspective. As for Living Legend, we have Channel Length Frigid unrestricted to help with Icelander, right? And sort of slow down the aggressive decks, since we now have, again, fully Bond Unleashed Zen, as well as some of the degeneracy with KO and Savage Sash, or even Rhina with Savage Sash. So hopefully, again, just freeing her up a little bit, she'll be a nice counter to them. And Bravo, everything they've done for him has made him so he is not a dominant one, right? Then for Blitz, we have a bit of a problematic issue for me, right, in a statement. So Aether Wildfire and Aether Flare are banned, and we have this. With the release of Blaze Firemind, we want to give players a brief window to experience the maximum power fantasy of that hero in a reasonably low-stakes environment. Skirmish Season 9 is around the corner though, and with Rosetta following soon after, it is time to move on from the era of Aether Twins. So, the problem that I have with this, and it again further cements what James White had said about Blitz is just this sort of throwaway format, and this is them acknowledging that in a sense, and basically saying, we wanted to hype up Blaze, she was hyped, and now it's gone, right? And I think that just does not sit well with me, right? This idea that they have this full understanding and knowledge that this was always on the chopping block, Aether Wildfire and Aether Flare, but they wanted to, again, promote Blaze as strongly as they had through all the conventions and all the other ways to acquire her, to, again, drum up hype and excitement, knowing full well that they were going to gut it going into the more competitive season of Blitz. And overall, the biggest problem I have with this is, again, going to strike decks. Strike decks, call them whatever you want. We haven't seen the deck list yet, but they are just a rebranding of Blitz. Plain and simple. They are Blitz decks. So that is a problem, because we have this just acknowledgement that Blitz is this casual, we can, make it as strong as we want, neuter it whenever we want, and just have a nice, fun time. But we're still pushing it as the new player format. We're still pushing it in some semblance of competitiveness. And altogether, it's sort of weird because both product lines, Armory decks and First Strike decks, neither of them excite me. Neither of them sit well with me. I am interested in the cards that are being presented, especially in the Armory decks, right? We haven't seen the Strike decks yet. But overall, the issue to me is they don't do anything. They don't redo anything. Armory decks are just class constructed decks, right? They are not Armory decks. LSS even presents full forward that here's what you need to do, or what you should be looking to do to modify it to make it more competitive. So presenting it as, again, an Armory deck is incorrect to me, because it's not. It's just a precon for class constructed, which we have always asked for, and we've got it, which is fantastic. And then the same goes for strike decks. All right, I don't fully understand what could be in them to make them a new player route. Either way, they don't line up with class constructed, and the metagames for the two have completely shifted. So altogether, they fail in my perspective as a product. They might get new players in the door, they might excite new players, but then you always have this tumultuous time of transitioning from Blitz to class constructed and playing X heroes, right? Terra probably won't eat, well, he might have an adult hero, but currently, right, you can't take the Terra deck and you can't transition class constructed. As for, I forgot what the Lightning Woman, Nova? No. Is it Nova? No. I'm going to have to look this up. But basically, same thing, right? Her playstyle for Blitz is going to be vastly different than her playstyle for class constructed, just because of the speed. Aurora, there we go, right? So altogether, I dislike both product lines, plain and simple. Now, as for my tumultuous nature towards Fab, altogether, I have always loved and admired the passion and the conviction towards their game that LSS, and James White in particular, has shown. He is basically anyone who has ever thought of making a TCG game. That is what you strive to be. One, to be successful enough to accomplish it, but then also to have the drive conviction to make sure it stays on target and is exactly what you want it to be. And that is fantastic. I don't want to undersell that. My personal problem is I got into the game for PvE. Plain and simple, right? PvE was announced from the get-go, and yes, James White has admitted that he regretted saying anything about it, and he shouldn't have. Because truth be told, I got into it with the expectation in a year or two we'll get PvE, and until then I'll be mainly a collector. PvE is not on the horizon, so that interest has completely waned. Collectability is not great. I don't like buying cards. I don't like holding cards or speculating. I like opening to find things, and yes, I can still open to find things, but I have to wade through a mountain of other garbage, right? It is garbage. It is sitting in my room in endless boxes that will just be thrown out because no one wants it. No one wants the commons. No one wants the rares. Foils, maybe. I'm not going to bother, right? So for every pack I open, well, it's not even every pack. It's every 4 packs, right? Is a Majestic. There is just, it's throwaway. And that to me is not a fun time, right? It's not a game I enjoy opening. It's not a game I really enjoy playing because I'm not a competitive person. I like making goofy decks. I like making fun decks, and that would shine a lot better, again, in PvE and in however that formed. So, you know, what is there personally for me when it comes to Fab? Now, I'm not going to stop opening. It's still my go-to game. I still am very much interested in the direction it's going and to see at least where it's going, whether or not I agree with the choices made or anything like that. It's still a wonderful game. It's still a wonderful company. It's just, it no longer truly aligns with my true interests, right? So in terms of the channel, this is probably what I'm really getting at, right? The amount of content that I put out for Fab is probably going to be reduced, right? Again, I might still do occasional box openings here or there, and I will probably still cover things of interest to me. But for instance, the scheduled banned and restricted announcement. Again, I don't play competitive, right? My interest in Zen is Crouching Tigers and weird, just outrageous Christmas land shenanigans. So Bonds, while it was interesting, was never something I was going to use, right? I'm never going to make a truly competitive deck because I'm not a competitive player, nor, even if I chose to be, is there any way for me to be competitive, right? Australia is dwindling. A lot of places are dwindling. Fab lacks horrible sustain, lack it lacks proper marketing, it lacks a lot of things that should be addressed internally. And again, it's bittersweet because the amount of effort that they put in towards the competitive scene and where it is booming is fantastic, right? And again, should not be undersold. But there is definitely a lot of room to grow as a company, right? So personally, again, nowhere around me. The closest game store, right, for me to do events here and there, not even weekly. I think they're monthly. Is 40-minute drive one way, 40-minute drive back, right? So hour and a half round trip, and that's not during traffic. And generally, I will always be going with the traffic because I'll be going to a major city from rural, and I'm rural, so that's also unfortunate, right? So altogether, there's nothing for me competitively. There's nothing for me for PvE, because PvE is not coming, right? There's nothing for me. I mean, yes, there's still the other formats, right? But again, goes back to, well, it's not booming. We have online. Online is not truly supported. It probably will never be supported, and I think that is the biggest mistake. And there are a lot of things overall that I think LSS really need to rip the Band-Aid off and just accept this is the world we live in. In the Flesh and Blood is fantastic and can still be your core prerogative. But we are in a highly internet-based society that is utilized by so many things and so many people to, again, globalize your product. And it is ridiculous to not be looking into or trying to support some version of online play, right? Some form of proper online drafting, competitive, or, again, fun and casual systems. PvE would probably be a wonderful testing place online, right? But that's not the world we live in, and they're probably going to stick to their guns. And the same goes for collections, right? We need certain card content, and development-wise, it is never going to work out. We are at the point of, God, it's 20 plus heroes, right? And say every hero has 1 to 2 decent archetypes, and I honestly think that should be more. But development-wise, is only going to get slower and slower to revisit or rebrand or reintroduce X thing. And that is, again, problematic because as a large, the game is not sustainable. The game will only ever be whatever LSS decide to put at the forefront. And that is horrible, right? Because there is so many great mechanics in the game, so much time invested in development. And I'm not even talking about products or ideas that have fallen short and failed, or just been retired for whatever reason. I'm talking strictly about making every hero viable, and 15 cards is not that. 15 cards for the expander slot does not do anything to that, right? It helps with the echelon of heroes, right? And here and there, one might squeeze through, but, we're at the point of probably hitting only 50% of the current heroes, and that's only going to grow and grow. We're getting 5 new heroes. Again, Terra might have an adult version, might not, but at the very least, we're getting 4 adult new heroes in the next set. That's already adding to the pool. They half replace some of the heroes, right? But it's still a great number. And altogether, that's going to continue, right? The best prerogative for money from LSS and to keep people interested in sets is always to introduce something new, right? That is what's going to allow people to spend because that's the only way they access it. And that in itself is also, a bit of a problem, but a business has to do what a business has to do. Now, in terms of other development issues, again, we've had mentors. Do you remember them? We've had classic battles. Remember them? We've had, what else has sort of come and gone? Unity, X keywords tried and tested and fallen short. Anything else? Yeah, I think that's about it, right? Or history products, right? They're gone too. Altogether, they're a young company. They're testing and trialing, and I think it's time to just sit on the sideline for a little bit and see where it goes. I will, again, still probably be buying Rosetta. I might open a box or two on stream, but most likely I'm going to go back to collecting with my partner, and that's it. We might as well throw out all the pessimism, right? So I hate the release cycle, right? I hate this 3-week window where everything is fueled by scalping, greed, and hype, right? And it just overinflates a set. It makes it horrible for a new player, right? Because they're either spending way too much on cards, They're either opening something fantastic and watching it dwindle, and it's a sucker's game, the environment that LSS have created, right, to sustain its collectability. And altogether, I don't know. I think at this point in time, there's probably just more things that disinterest me towards the design structure, right? I'm not talking about the game design. Again, Flesh and Blood, to me, is the best TCG mechanically that will ever come for a long while, right? Everything else is, RNG based or trying to craft a deck that restricts RNG, where, well, it's actually hard to say because Fab is getting to the point where it's RNG and then restricting RNG, right? Having specific combos and lines rather than having a hand of 4 and going, well, my best play is this, right? The versatility of decks is being heavily reduced. And yeah, I guess that's my main piece, right? But, that is the way development goes. Next year will be completely different to this year. And simply put, strike decks, armory decks, cards of interest, overall product not of interest. Rosetta, still interested in it. But again, the way it is released and introduced to the community, after being a part of Misfail and the hype for that and the excitement around boxes and cracking these cards to scalp Enigma, altogether, it's not too exciting for me. And yeah, that's my honest thoughts. So now I'm going to watch this back and decide whether or not to post it. Hope you enjoyed. So yeah. Actually, just a few more thoughts, right, before I end up, because I'm not sure if I'll do a proper video, right, regarding any of these thoughts. But again, character-wise or hero-wise, we're at 27 currently in play. Of the ones that have actually, gained points in Misspell season, right, that's 50%, 14 out of the 27 or slightly more. But, the ones that have hardly any, do you really say they are meta-relevant as they are? Again, we have Rosetta introducing 4 new heroes. There is crossover with the pre-existing elemental heroes, but if you look at Tales and you look at how things are going to have to go, the crossover is minimalistic. They're going to require completely new packages to make them functionally work, which means Rosetta, similar to Dusk Till Dawn, will in essence be a standalone kit for the heroes. And again, that goes back to the development cycle. If they have to, again, prop up and create an entire new system for every new hero that they introduce rather than trying to mend and reutilize what pre-exists, then we're going to continue into slow development, and that altogether is a problem. The other big issue for me is, again, going back to RNG, right? So in a deck, you would have different choices. Take Command & Conquer in the early days. Command & Conquer was basically the only Arsenal disruption. So it was a premium in your deck, right? You find it and you can have a very impactful turn. You don't find it, well, you can't bank on finding it. We're getting to the point where there's tons. There's tons of Arsenal disruption cards, and there's going to probably be more printed. So it's not a idea of, replace Command & Conquer with this. It's now the idea of Command & Conquer plus this. So you need both cards. And also, rather than, again, not banking on finding Arsenal disruption, you're building a deck with the prospect of going every 2 turns, every 3 turns, every 4 turns, whatever it works out to, I'm going to have Arsenal disruption. And that goes for every single sort of generic core mechanic for the game. We're going to have a surplus of redesigns that, again, to the player, it now becomes, well, I won't take all of them because I want to reduce the RNG. I want to be able to find one of these cards to have their impactful effect go off, rather than, again, being dealt 4 cards and going, well, I have to think what is my best possible line with these 4 cards, rather than trying to bank on the future. And the last biggest critique that I sort of have is nothing I have ever made structurally wise for a deck has ever felt innovative or my own thought, if that sort of makes sense. Even when it comes to melody and trying to make final act work, everything has always felt like this is exactly how LSS intended it to play out, right? And going back to their statement regarding bonds in Zen, they, again, say that they just didn't have the time to refine it to the point of the community, which is, it's great for the competitive side, but I think one thing Fab really lacks is the community touch, right? Where the community comes together and they find what is absolutely busted, what is, this weird, quirky combination of cards. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but they do their job. They test everything. They make sure the crossover of cards is heavily restricted, And again, it generally feels like you're just playing whatever LSS wants to be meta relevant, right? And even on the fun and casual side, again, it doesn't feel like, oh, cool, this is such a cool gimmick. This feels, again, exactly how LSS wanted it to be played, right? I tried so many different things in Melody to try and make them work. Sun's Kiss and Moonwish, running a ton of amulets, cash out, and it just boiled down to the same sort of idea where you gotta take what's optimal, what's generally just aggro if you want it to be, again, more successful, if you want to survive to the point of final acting. And yeah, it just didn't felt innovative to me, and I think that goes back to the segregation between cards and the crossover. And I will always cite Bright Lights. If the items in Bright Lights were accessible to every single class, right, that would have led to a lot of fun. They wouldn't be able to fully test it, and sure, broken stuff would come out, and bans and restrictions will probably have to have been put into play. But from a community side, I think that would have led to a lot more fun, and it's something I sort of miss from Magic, right? Is that community touch where there is optimal and then there is the goofy, and the goofy is, it feels like you've thought this up, whereas Fab, anything creative I think about, doesn't feel like I've thought it up. It just feels like I've finally aligned the pieces as LSS has intended. So yeah, that sort of stifles my creativity and my desire to, again, make goofy decks, right? I could show you all an OTK for the Boltyn chess piece, but LSS most likely know exactly what they're doing because the majority of draw cards are in yellow, right? And there was already the pre-existing OTK or a big turn for Boltyn, so it's just easier, right? Anyway, that's my thoughts. Again, I might make a proper video, or we're just going to stick with it being tied to the banned and restricted. Enjoy. See ya.